Week 2, Eastern Michigan. Time for some keys to the game.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athlon Sports' Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Lars, we got a really fun show for the Everydayers today. It is time for I think it's both of our favorite show of the week. During game week, it's time for bold predictions, your always accurate score prediction, defensive keys to the game, and we always start for any everydayers who might be a little bit new after, maybe joining us in the offseason or anything like that. We always start with the offensive keys to the game. So, Lars, when you look up at this matchup against Eastern Michigan, what is your number one key to the game for Washington on the offensive side?
So, I don't want to rinse and repeat exactly last week, but I think it's starting fast. I'm going to change it a little bit, and it's just a generic start fast. Kind of to your point last week of, I don't care if Will's doing checkdowns. I don't think we're going to see Will take some deep shots in the game, or at least early on, just because of the Eastern Michigan's front seven and front four specifically. And I think to combat a really aggressive front, you got to do a mix of kind of run and screen checkdowns. And I think that what we saw against Weber State was more or less what we saw in the first scrimmage. We need to see that second scrimmage, that third scrimmage energy of, hey, we can actually start quick. And now that it's a day game, maybe the offense will wake up a little earlier and just kind of get the ball going, whether it's Jonah, whether it's Cam, whether it's Will, just kind of get those scoring drives earlier and get some more confidence building early on in the game.
Sure. So I like where you're going with that. My number one key to the game is something we talked about the other day, and I hinted at it. I like starting fast, and I'm going to integrate that into this. Starting fast in the passing game, where, we put out a little poll the other day asking, hey, who's going to have the biggest impact in this game? The overwhelming response was Jonah Coleman, which I love, I respect, because I think he's going to have just as big of an impact as a pass catcher than as he will in the running game. Where I'm going back and looking at the film, some of these Eastern Michigan guys, they're really good in the front seven, I want to say, but when I look at them as pass coverage linebackers, it's not necessarily I want to say great. And I think that's something that Jonah can take a big advantage of. But it's not just him. Where we talked about they're going to counter 11 personnel with a traditional 4-3. I want to see, and I got this right last time. I said that the first completion of the season was going to go to Denzel Boston, and it did. And I'm going to double down on that this week, and this is going to be an early bold prediction. I think that the first two completions are going to go to Jeremiah Hunter.
I can see that. Well, I think that's the interesting thing is, can you implement more than three receivers? Well, in reality, we only really saw 2 plus a tight end in the opener, where it's Giles, it was Denzel, and it was, well, I guess part Latu, part Moore with a couple of catches, and then Decker, right? So it's kind of like 3 total because Decker only had the 1, but then Moore had left the game in the first half, and so you didn't have enough opportunities to do it. But it's also like you have to have the time to do it. And I think that's what I'm going to be curious of is, how do the splits change? Because there was 35 rushes, 30 some odd attempts. So because Will ended up having 2 less attempts than they had rushes. That's what I remember from the opener.
No, sorry. I just want to say that I think that's a little skewed, just because when we look at it overall, where that includes Damon Williams, who had a couple of dropbacks that he turned into scrambles. And so obviously that's going to end up counting as a rushing attempt, where you take that, there's 3 of those. So it's very, very balanced either way. I just want to make sure that's in there, that it's very balanced. And depending on how much we see Damon versus how much we see Will, probably going to be somewhat similar. I just want to make sure that's in there.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's why I said it was only two different, where you're not necessarily, like if you're talking 2 more passes or 2 more runs, especially at the end of a game when you're already up by 28, like, yeah, for sure. Probably should be running the ball a little bit more at the end. So that's I'm glad you clarified that. But it to me, it kind of, what we talk about, what we'll talk about the second segment with the defense is, can Jed's scheme kind of match up by opponent? Because I think it can. I know it can. Yeah. But, how does that look at Washington? How is he able to get, for example, Jeremiah involved more? How does Giles get, take a hit, or does his numbers kind of stay relatively the same? And I think Giles, I would almost say Giles is the reason. Giles would be the guy instead of Jeremiah, not necessarily because Jeremiah is not good. I think Jeremiah will have a decent amount of catches in the game, but when you look at the role that Giles plays, that over the middle, that get the ball in space, that Jonah Coleman, that release valve role, look at the secondary that Eastern Michigan has. A lot of inexperience. And I am talking a lot of inexperience in that secondary. And so for me, Giles is a guy who seems to know how to get open over the middle almost more often than not.
Right. But we're splitting hairs here to an extent, but it's fun. We enjoy this. That's why I'm going with Jeremiah, where who has the most receiving yards among all those guys? It's Jeremiah. So
I'll take Giles.
It's Jeremiah from his time at Cal. I'm saying in terms of his career. Yeah, sorry. No, my bad. Yeah, so I'm saying overall. So who has the most experience? If you really want to get down to it, it's Jeremiah, who didn't have any catches last week. Where that's gonna play into this a little bit, in my opinion. Where guys will say, "Oh, it's about the team, whatever." We didn't get to talk to Jeremiah after the game, but they'll say, "Oh, it's about the team, it's about this, it's about that." Jed wants to make sure that guy is worked into the offense, because if he gets, let's just say, 1 or 2 catches in total this week, and maybe the same thing against Wazoo, all of a sudden teams are going to be like, oh, maybe we don't need to scheme for this in a certain way. And of course, that's when Jed, being who he is going to give him 13 targets in a game. But why not establish that now? Why not establish, we saw what Denzel can do. We know Denzel can be that guy. We know that Giles is a safety blanket. We know he was 10 for 10 on targets and catches. Why not get a third guy involved too and really stretch a defense out, especially a defense that's going to play big, that's going to play a little bit slower and a little bit heavier? Why not stretch it out with a guy like Jeremiah? No, absolutely. When you look at Eastern Michigan's two teams, I'm dealer's choice of who he lines up against, but I would not be surprised if Jeremiah lines up against their 6'5" freshman quarterback. Sure. Perfect test, because Denzel, the other one I think is 5'11", which, I mean, Jeremiah is 6'2", so I could see that being flipped. But as their own athlete, it's like, I think that's kind of the good problem to have, is you can probably let Jeremiah test the younger freshman, and knowing Denzel is going to have a height advantage over the sophomore. And if it doesn't work, you just flip him. And then I would almost be surprised if Jeremiah doesn't have 3 catches against the 5'10" cornerback, who's, let's just be real, not a power 5 guy, so power 4 guy. So I think this is kind of the perfect opportunity for Jeremiah. And I agree. Like, they have to get Jeremiah involved. Like that is without question, because if he goes into that Wazoo game with 2 catches for 35 yards in a season where he's talked about, hey, I came to Washington to prepare to be in the NFL. Yeah. In the NFL, you don't always get your targets, but a guy like Jeremiah with his veteran experience, like, to me, that doesn't track and doesn't add up. So for me, you got to imagine Kevin Cummings is looking at him and Will and Jed saying, hey, like, what do we got to do to get the ball, not to force it necessarily into Jeremiah's hands, but to say, look, like, we got 2 good receivers. We saw what happens last year when these guys have 3. I'm not saying Jeremiah is going to be one of those 3, but that's the mentality you have to take, and that will also benefit Giles. It'll benefit Denzel. It'll benefit Kalecki. It'll benefit Decker. It'll benefit whoever else they end up throwing out there, because, again, we have to look at that depth. It's like, there ain't much options there. Who's the next guy up? Audrey Harris, probably, or Rashid Williams. I was going to say Rashid, yeah. So what else? Thing I want to make sure. Sorry, I want to make sure we hit on one other thing real quick, and it plays into the playing bigger that Cam Davis talked about a little bit earlier this week, and it's the offensive line. And what is that going to look like? Where we talked a little bit yesterday about what's Kalecki Latu going to look like as a blocker if Quentin Moore is not playing, and there are so many other things that have to go with that. But in terms of if they're going to send a lot of blitzes, which it sounds like they're going to be very aggressive in terms of trying to get the ball out of Will's hands faster, trying to make him hold the ball a little bit longer, and trying to make him just second guess himself for whatever reason, that you want to make sure that you have the offensive line to withstand that. And our guy Ben Glassmeyer wrote a fantastic article over on Huskies Wire grading the offensive line after week 1, and I'm just really curious to see how they hold up. So that's something I'm going to be watching very, very closely, is how they're going to handle the amount of blitzes that they might see this weekend. And Lars, with that being said, let's get over to the defense. right after a message from our friends over at LinkedIn. Because when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. Because LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In any given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. You can hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn because LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. And that's why LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the hiring process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockdowncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockdowncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Lars, defense, what you got?
So for me, it's about availability. It's for me, the defensive key kind of starts with getting Javon Parker, just because what we saw a good kind of showing initially from Jacob Bandis, but as we talked about in the lead up to the opener, Javon Parker. There we go.
There we go.
Javon Bandis,
right
Javon
position.
Bandis.
Yeah.
Right. But no, he brings such a different element to the room. And same thing with Logan Sagapolu, as I mentioned either earlier, I think on Tuesday or on Thursday show. But just getting those two guys more involved, especially when you look at Dante McMillan and Mims, the transfer running back from North Carolina State, two veteran guys. Neither one of them is a true bell cow starter. They look like they go like 12 to 15 snaps per, kind of depending on whichever one has the hot hand. But they only had one touchdown. And so if you can limit their rush game, which clearly it seems like that's kind of what they run to set up the pass sort of situation. If you can shut that run game down, which is what they struggled with, the first couple of drives, the true Washington defense would do early on. Again, they ended up plugging the holes and only gave up 130, 125, 130, somewhere in that ballpark. It wasn't atrocious, but again, it wasn't great. You should be able to hold these guys kind of in a similar, 90 to 110, maybe a touchdown, especially when you look at what the defense did week one and you're getting these guys back. Like that to me is that's where everything starts.
So I agree with you. And one thing that I know you mentioned on yesterday's show, and I want to kind of put you on the spot here. What kind of role do you think that kind of gets from Logan Sagapolu in this game?
So that's kind of the hard part because he clearly can play as a 3, right? As a true nose tackle, but I think he's best suited in a 4-down front, still having somebody next to him, just because if you're asking him to be a run stuffer, yeah, he's still getting 2 guys, but you're in a 3-down front, you're kind of getting more exposed in that regard, and Logan ends up becoming a little bit of a waste. So I think having that 4-down front is where he's going to thrive best.
So I hear what you're saying, and I'm going to counter a little bit here, where I want to see if we see more of the 5-man fronts. Where one thing that we saw a lot of in the fall, especially that we saw a little bit of, not necessarily in the terms of the way it might be used to counter the run, more so as pass rushers with Jacob Lane and Deshaun Lynch and Voight-Chanufi in there, is that 5-man front where there are 3 defensive tackles, where we've seen them show that look where it's Javon Parker and Sebastian Valdez and Logan Sagapolu or Jacob Bandis or Bryce Butler or Linneus Davis or Deshaun Lynch, or where one of those other guys are lined up as a 4-eye. So there are a bunch of different ways that this can play out. And that's something that, just like you, that I'm really intrigued to see, where what are they going to do to show that they've improved in stopping the run? Is it going to be going to that look, or is it going to be, holding gaps better, playing a little bit more sound? Because it feels like there are a lot of different ways for them to do that. I just want to see which way is best for Steve Belichick. Personally, I think it might be that. I think if you show some of these big, heavy looks and say, hey, we're kind of daring you to throw the ball here, I want to see what that looks like in a game like this, because it allows where I don't think Logan's going to be a super impactful pass rusher over the course of the season, but I wouldn't say that about Sebastian Valdez or Javon Parker. So when I look at it from that perspective, it's all right. Are you going to throw these heavy looks out there and say, we're daring you to throw the ball and then try to get after them with those guys?
Yeah. I mean, the reason why I said 4 was kind of a traditional front,
No, I hear you. I just wanted to.
No, because I agree perfectly with your principle, because that's exactly what you would have. You have 3 big guys in the middle, 2 edgers, potentially an extra rusher coming up the middle, even with the 3 interior tackles. And especially when you look at, like I said, Eastern Michigan doesn't necessarily have the greatest receivers. Like, no disrespect to those guys. Like, I'm not saying they're scrubs, but you should be able to kind of sell out to stop the run to force the pass against a team like Eastern Michigan. And it's a perfect test because Belichick loves to put his cornerbacks on the island, loves to test the future of Pricestock. And why you have Pricestock, why you have Thaddeus Dixon, why you have Cam Ressard, who can pretty much do everything, Cam McKinnon in a similar mold. I think that's why you go to that big 4 or 5 man front, as you said, because you have the talent on the back end, and the opposing offense should not beat those guys flat out. Right. Like, now, if you get run over, that's a different problem. And I think if I'm Steve Belichick, right, exactly. If I'm Steve Belichick, I would rather give up 50 yards rushing and like 350 passing, and just think, yeah, you know what, Singleton happened to go off, or so and so happened to go off, whatever. Great. You're not going to beat us in the run. Like, that's just one thing they cannot have. Because the reason why I say that is I don't think the secondary is getting beat. That's why I say that to say I agree. I'm not saying like, oh, the secondary. Who cares about the secondary? DBU. What is that? That's nothing. No, it's a safer bet to bet on those secondary guys holding up when you have a better front 4, front 5.
So I'm certainly with you there. One thing that in that same mold that I want to see is that it's a counter to both, really, depending on how you want to discuss it, is a quarterback spy. Where what's that going to look like? How are you going to keep the scramble out? Where we saw last week that Richie Munoz was able to get away a couple of times and pick up some yards with his legs, where it wasn't necessarily game changing, but it's something that you'd rather clean up now than, somebody who I'm really impressed with in terms of his mobility is Drew Aller. When you go to Penn State in November, obviously there's a lot of time between now and then. A lot can change between now and then, but isn't that something you want to get figured out now in terms of, all right, we don't want anybody to get out of the pocket, beat us with their legs throughout the season long?
Yeah, well, it's what kind of Jed hinted at in his Monday pressure, which was, yeah, we only gave up 3 points, but the time of possession split was basically dead even. Like, yeah. And I think, and those are those drives where, okay, you bend, but you don't break. You don't give up the points. You don't get totally beat for yardage, but they do just enough to bleed the clock to where it's not going to be a, 40, 50, 60 point game. You'll get to 30, but we're not going to give you enough possessions to where, and that's kind of what we're talking about with the offense, which is, can you find those extra possessions? Can you, when we get to the predictions and keys to the other kind of, bold predictions, can you force some interceptions? One thing I thought we would see in the opener that we didn't, and I guess when you think about it, that bet was probably more apropos for this week than last week, especially with, Munoz not being as good of a passer. So I'm not saying I'm going to run it back this week, but it's one of those situations where especially with Cole Sanders still being a very mobile quarterback who did have a rushing touchdown in the opener, to his credit, it's okay. You're getting a more polished Munoz. Can you look more polished against a more polished Munoz, for lack of a better example? Because when you're
no, I was just going to say. So I think yes. Where that's one thing that I'm really excited to continue to watch is the evolution of this secondary, and whether it be if more guys are able to play this weekend, like a Leroy Bryant, or like a Darren Barkins, what that might look like. What's that going to be? And I think that getting more guys in the rotation will keep players fresher. Whereas, as you said, Thaddeus Dixon played a team high in snaps. I believe you said that on yesterday's show, where he played a team high 65 snaps. Where that's really interesting. And that's something where, if Leroy's out there more, Darren's out there more, you're going to spell him a little bit, or you're going to ride the hot hand there, where Ephesians Pricestock looked phenomenal. Where I think Thaddeus Dixon had a better game, but watching Ephesians Pricestock, I was like, yeah, no, I feel like he's getting tested a lot because nobody wants to test that guy. So I think that's all part of it, but that's exciting. And that's all part of what this scheme can be. And let's call it week 6 when Michigan comes to town, where all of a sudden you're looking at it and there are kinks here. There's still little things that need to be worked out for it to be running on all cylinders and clicking as it should be. Those are some of the little things that need to work out now in terms of things outside of what you might expect in terms of, all right, technical discipline, this, that, in terms of keeping guys fresh and making sure that if somebody needs to be out for a couple of plays or an entire series or even worse, like a full game, having more guys behind them that can fit that rotation and continue to do a job is going to be really important. And this is something where I'm really excited to see how that works.
Exactly. That's why I mentioned Elijah Jackson being the highest graded guy in coverages. He only played 25 snaps, which I said before the game, he played about 20. Thaddeus got about 60 plus 55, somewhere in that ballpark. So there's still a significant gap, but if you can come in and do a job for 25 plays, you do a job for 25 plays. That's all you need, whether it's against Weber State or Michigan. If Elijah comes in and is the highest graded player against Michigan or Indiana and he's only playing 25, 30 snaps, okay. Like, because again, here's the thing. When you look at guys in the NFL with his size and things like that, if you're a contributor who can do a job, you will find a role in the NFL. Now, again, will you be a top first round picks? Probably not. But there's a lot of guys who begin their NFL careers doing a job and then growing into a role. That's exactly kind of what EJ is doing here at Washington.
Lars, I've got some really exciting bold predictions. I know you do as well. So let's get there. Right after message from our friends over at Game Time, because Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I love Game Time. It's been so helpful for me to go to so many different ballparks this summer. Used in St. Louis, used it here in Seattle, used it in Boston. It's awesome. I love watching baseball thanks to Game Time and Game Time Picks, because curation makes it so much easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. And they're all in pricing where if you toggle this feature, it shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout, and with their lowest price guarantee, or where Game Time will credit you with 110% of the difference if you can find a lower price elsewhere. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. So Lars, I'm going first this week. I remembered, which is, a shocker in Locked On Huskies fashion. I always forget who's supposed to go first. I'm going first this week. I'm getting a little specific this week where, we enjoy Carson over 12 tackles, Jonah Coleman, 120 yards and 2 touchdowns, things like that. This was really fun. I've got a very exact one for you this week where I talked about it earlier in the week that I think this is going to be a big game for Will Rogers. I think that he's going to finish this game 31 of 36 through the air. That's what I'm going with here. And I'll take the points if it's not exactly that, but I have a good feeling that Jed is going to want him to throw a little bit more than he did last week, where he finished 20 of 26 last week. And part of that is not just the coverages that he's going to be seeing and some of the personnel that he's going to be seeing, but I think that Jed is going to really want to establish this. I think that they're going to run more plays. I think that this Eastern Michigan offense might not be able to hang with this UW defense. I got another equally specific prediction for that side of the ball, but I'll get there as well. And I think that just the more that I look at these matchups, I think that Will is going to have a really solid day, and I'm going to add 3 touchdowns to that.
Okay, I was gonna wonder about that, because I was gonna throw down the alley-oop that you picked up with respect to the passing game, and I'll take a slight page out of your playbook here. Washington will have 2 100-yard receivers. Okay, and one of them will be Denzel Boston. Now, yes. Again, don't ask me which catches, touchdown, target, whatever. I would bet, I'm willing to make the safe bet that one receiver will have at least 100 yards. And this is, by the way, it's a bold prediction because nobody had 100 in week 1. Giles got the closest at 98. So with that being said, again, as I mentioned, weaker secondary that you're facing, Jed wanting to test, as you mentioned, this is kind of right for Will to say, hey, you know what, midday game, let's blow out the we saw what McMillan in Arizona did last week. Let's see if we can find our Washington version of that. I'm not saying that's going to be the case. Not saying that's going to be the case. There's going to be 2 of them. There'll be 2 100-yard receivers, not one 200-yard receiver with 4 touchdowns. Which, oh man, could you imagine if he made it somehow all the way up to Seattle with Jed?
Every single day. I imagine that every single day. I won't go down the rabbit hole of other things that I think about in terms of UW guys that at one point were considering the school during the recruitment process, because it just causes me a whole lot of pain. So let's move to my second one on that wonderful note here. Not only are there going to be 3 passing touchdowns in this game, Lars, but Washington is going to have 3 rushing touchdowns, and I'm going to give 2 of them to Jonah Coleman, and I'm going to give the third one to DeMond Williams. Where I really like the Coleman pick, where I I'm just so excited about what he can be, what he showed he's going to be in week 1. I think that continues. And Lars, if he scores 2 touchdowns on the ground this week, that will be the same amount that he scored on the ground at Arizona all of last season. So I think that Jed in the back of his mind knows this and said, yeah, we're going to really make sure that we pad Jonah stats this year. Jake Butt earlier on in the week called him arguably the best running back in the country this season after his week 1 performance, which I respect. PFF seemed to back that up with their grade. So yeah. And I think that Damon Williams is also going to find a way to get into the end zone, a little 3-yard scramble, just show off that speed, that athleticism, and get in the end zone for his first career rushing touchdown.
See, I wasn't sure if you were going Will or Damon with that one. I had a hunch you were going with Damon, but I was kind of rooting for Will to see.
I had to.
No, because you're absolutely right. But it's also what we said. But remember what I said last week, where you thought 5 to 10 passes. Like, I'd say no more than 5 or 6.
Right.
So, I know that's what I'm saying. Right. So I might have missed. I might have missed a few things last week, but I hit one of them. And so I'm going to go with the defense because we've got to get a couple of defensive ones in here. I will leave the overall one for you. The traditional. You can pick whoever's going to lead the team of tackles.
Oh, I don't have one of those this week.
Oh, okay. Go. Oh, perfect. Okay, so I'll you know what? I'll steal it then. I will pick because Zoe had it last week.
Yeah,
I'm gonna say Cam Fabiculani with 8.
Okay.
And I think, and just to give you a number there, nothing's going to be revolutionary, but I think Cam's a guy when you look at how much they're going to want to end up throwing when he comes down and makes some plays in the run game. It was a toss-up between him and Cam Broussard, and again, I love Cam trying to go make that play last week, but buddy, you have a club. Just let that one go. It's beside the point. But I think for that reason, Cam Fab is kind of the heartbeat up the middle in the secondary, not Carson in the secondary, not linebackers. Be clear here. And so I think this what Eastern Michigan is going to try and do both in the run and pass game. I think it kind of leads for somebody on the back end to have the team high in tackle, almost like Dom Hampton last season, if you would.
No, I like that. Yeah. Where I think it's a little bit different than Dom, where he was kind of forced to make a whole lot of tackles, but I see where you come from there. And I like that. So here's my other oddly specific one that I know we haven't done anything like this before. Lars, last week, Washington averaged 3.1 yards per attempt allowed. And I think they're just going to play horribly this week, as I say, tongue in cheek, because I think in week 2, they are going to allow less than 4 yards per attempt yet again, where I think that the secondary is just going to play absolutely smothering coverage. And I'm just so excited about what Thaddeus Dixon can do, what Ephesians Priceock can do, Jordan Shaw. Like you just go down the list of guys in the secondary. I think that they're going to go under 4 yards per attempt yet again and stake the claim that you and I have been making all offseason that this is going to be one of the nation's best defenses.
So I like that, and I was trying to think of a couple other defensive ones to do. Obviously last week with the 3 interceptions that didn't necessarily come to fruition. The sacks didn't.
Hey, it was 3 takeaways, not 3 interceptions.
Oh, true. But yeah, did they even have one?
Nope, we don't need to go down that road either.
That's what I was saying. So for me, I'm gonna piggyback off your point. It's something that I think is going to be very telling about the Steve Belichick defense. Washington will maintain their under 30% on third down rate. I like that. And that for me is kind of the tell-all of the game, where offensively it was what it was, but defense, I think they were at 4-17 on third down.
It was not good.
It was great if you're Washington.
Yeah.
And terrible.
Horrible for offenses.
Yeah. Right. Just to kind of clarify that one for the people. But no, and when you're talking about getting guys back, you're talking about how good the defense looks against Weber State, the growth that we expect them to make. I feel like, and again, you would know better than anybody who's on the show, I feel like a hallmark of Steve Belichick's defense is going to be third downs and just third down prevention, multiple different looks, whether you're not going to see the same third down look where it's like, hey, this is our third down package, kind of like what Chuck Morrell did last year with Jacob Lane. You could probably have 5 or 6 different packages on third down with the Steve Belichick.
We've already seen a little bit of that too, which is really interesting, where, on third and long, they go to that 0 down look, which we saw a lot of in the fall with, either Voy or Deshaun Lynch at that 0. So it's going to depend on down distance, and it's really fun. It's really exciting to see what that might look like. So Lars, I've got one more for you here. I'm going to go with a 2-sack game for Isaiah Ward. Jed talked about Isaiah Ward. Steve Belichick has, just credited the pass rush as a whole because that's what he's going to do. But there was a lot of credit thrown Isaiah Ward's way, whether it be PFF through Jed Fish. And he was a really, really impactful pass rusher. He collapsed the pocket really well, had a couple of pressures, a couple of PBUs. And I think that those are going to turn into sacks this week. And I'm really excited to see what he can do against this offensive line. And I think we're going to see some of those bigger body packages that we talked about a little bit earlier, which is going to lead to one-on-one opportunities for Isaiah Ward. And I think his length and athleticism are going to help him win a decent amount of those battles.
Yeah, I mean, number 1 edge rusher, number 5 edge rusher in the country. So, yeah, I mean, and again, in terms of overall defensive grade, his pass rush grade, I think, was a little bit further south, but not by much. Also, fantastic in the run game. So I think he's going to play a lot of snaps, which is my long-winded way of getting to the score prediction, which I know as we're getting, racing towards the end here. Let's do one of these little finger guns to the sky, all that sort of stuff.
That's my drum roll. I'm just not going to mess up my camera again.
No, I'm just busting your balls. But with that being said, I think obviously Washington wins the game. Go breaking news there. But for me, it's going to be how much of a statement can you set when you look at their week 3 opponent and what their week 1, offensive output looked like. I'm not saying it's going to be like that, but give me Washington 48, give me Eastern Michigan. I want to say 14, but I'll say 10.
Oh, okay, 10. I like that.
So, because again, I think, the way Steve Belichick answered my question about were you disappointed in the shutout? I don't think it's necessarily the score that's worried about. He can get 1, 5, 10, 14, and I think he's okay. 14 and above is a little pushing it. But I think if you get under 14, you're okay. It's just how does it look? Are you able to shut down on third down like I talked about? Are you able to play the back end like we talked about? That, to me, is going to be the key. So, Washington wins in a blowout, and it sets up everything we talked about with Jed Fish's offense, which – because, again, we predicted a lot of touchdowns on this episode, so we kind of needed some touchdowns in the game. So I couldn't exactly say it was going to be a defensive struggle. But I don't think Washington would get in the 50s. Until this defense proves that they can get some takeaways, which, again, if they do, that's where those extra drives come into play. Until we see that, I'm not going to bet on it, but I'm going to be inclined to see, hey, there's a chance it could happen. So there's a non-zero chance.
And just for the record, since we didn't say anything about them, forcing any turnovers this week, they're going to get 5. Just because we didn't say anything about it. And Lars, with that being said, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you all the everydayers tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. Thank you so much for making Locked On Huskies your first listen of the day. Now go check out the Locked On College Football podcast from NIL deals, never-ending conference realignment rumors. Our guy, Spencer McLaughlin, gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link to Locked On College Football in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. With that being said, we got so much more fun stuff coming for you throughout the season, so please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast. So that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating the channel through content every single day. So make sure you hit that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. You got any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please leave us 5-star reviews. It does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you after the game.